Okay, so we will begin.
All right.
Hello, everybody. Liam McCabe here, and I'm here with Tim Clarke, and we are doing the first of what is, I hope to be, many interviews on my channel. The reason why I thought of this was you, of course, interviewed me for your podcast, and that gave me the idea. You know, I of course, I know you. That's probably enough, but I do know a lot. I know a lot of people, and I think it would be interesting to hear from all the different kind of eclectic mix of people and all of the different things and the interesting lives they have. So we're here today, and I'd like to talk to you about a couple of things. But I guess first, tell some of the people out there on my channel a little bit about yourself.
My name is Timothy Clarke. I'm born and raised in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, which is how I know my friend Liam here. We go back a long ways.
Right.
I am a New York City firefighter. I don't know, what else is there to say? I raced professionally in the sport of long distance triathlon for several years, and that's kind of my jam. I started a podcast called the Personal Record Podcast in 2017. Liam was one of my first ever guests on it.
Yeah.
He's a very, very excellent speaker, and again, he was a good friend, so I reached out to him to see if he would be on it. He obliged me and gave me an hour worth of entertainment.
So please like and subscribe to that podcast as well.
The Personal Record Podcast, that's right.
And like and subscribe to this podcast or this YouTube channel. So talk to us a little bit about Bay Ridge. One of the ways I think we're going to have a starting off point with interviews is talking about the neighborhood. We of course know each other from the neighborhood. The neighborhood is really a great starting off point. You talked about 6 degrees of separation, but the neighborhood is really a great place to sort of meet so many different people in the world, and really people kind of go into all different places in the United States and all over the world that are kind of born and raised in Brooklyn. And you and I are both local Brooklyn Bay Ridge kids. So talk a little bit about growing up in Bay Ridge and what that meant to you.
You refer to Bay Ridge as a neighborhood, and it's I'm not gonna say it's one of the only ones, but it is a true New York City neighborhood, and it has remained so to this day. It's kind of like a land before time almost. It's not. It's you go back and you see a lot of the same people and a lot of the same stores. It's less so these days, but you see it's one of the few places in New York City that commercialism and it's a little less ravaged by that. You see a lot of small mom and pop kind of places, and it's very unique in terms of New York City for that reason. It's a very traditional sort of place, and again, it's just it's a place that I'm proud to have grown up in.
Right. One of those small businesses was the Yellow Hook Bar and Grill. You were a bartender there.
Yeah.
The place now is gone. You have another establishment there, and but tell us a little bit about Yellow Hook and your years there, and any funny stories you might have.
Oh God. Yellow Hook was. Yellow Hook, the history of Yellow Hook is a really interesting one. First of all, it was owned by the Long family, which is kind of a Bay Ridge institutional family. They were absolutely fantastic and kind of brought me in on the ground floor. I was really young and just looking for a bartending job because that's just what you do when you're from Bay Ridge. Right? You want to work in a bar.
Right.
That's kind of that's kind of the end all be all. Everyone always kind of looked up to the bartender.
Right. Anyway,
I reached out to the Longs to see if they were hiring, and they were, and I ended up working there for 8 years, pretty much the entirety of the time they were open. And I got to learn a lot about Bay Ridge, about people, and kind of the through the Third Avenue merchants and things like that. Just kind of like the politics or just the struggles that small businesses can go through on a daily basis. And I kind of say, I never really worked in a like a large corporation, so I don't really have any business experience, but I have a ton of like small business experience. And I learned a lot of that by working at Yellow Hook Grill and just watching how, again, just some of the things that they struggled with on a day-to-day basis, how hard it is to make money. Everyone thinks just because you own a business, you must be a millionaire, and that's not really the case.
Right.
And the ways in which, again, through the Third Avenue merchants and other organizations, the ways in which the different merchants in that area work together to try to help, bolster all of them, and it was a really fascinating experience, and I got to see a lot of the good and some of the bad that goes along with that. A lot of storefronts opening and closing and not really being able to pay their rent, not being able to stay open for significant amounts of time, and it was kind of sad to see people that pour themselves into these different businesses and pour themselves into their hobbies and their passions, and then to have it kind of flame out.
They say so many businesses fail, that start up, and that more businesses fail than are able to stay alive.
Is that
afloat.
in Bay Ridge or in general?
I think that's in general. I think that's a figure for small business in general, certainly in New York. And I think in Bay Ridge as well, you're seeing that a lot. There are so many businesses, particularly there's the spot right across the street from where Yellow Hook was on 72nd. There's always a business there where Side Street Cafe used to be.
Yeah,
that is a perennial bar, restaurant. I've seen probably, the rebirth of that place maybe 10 times.
The Side Street Cafe, located on the corner of 71st Street and 3rd Avenue.
Right.
It was like right up the street from where I grew up, but also where I went to school and everything. Right. And that was like the only restaurant I went to for probably the first 10 years of my life.
Right.
It was the only place we ever went. The only time we ever ate at restaurants was, for birthdays and communions and stuff like that. Probably not even birthdays, more like communions and confirmations.
Right.
And that was the only place we ever went. But ever since the Side Street Cafe closed down, it's been just place after place after place.
Right.
And again, it just shows how hard it is, one, just to stay afloat, how hard it is to make a living, how hard it is to be a small business owner, really anywhere.
Right.
But especially in New York City with rising rents and all that.
Right. It's interesting you talk about the Longs. So you got started with one of your first jobs working for the Longs, who owned the Yellow Hook Grill. I also got started. One of my first jobs was at the Longs liquor store on Fifth Avenue. I had gone to Ireland with Eddie Long. We were in St. Francis College together. We were on the track team together, me and Eddie. We both ran for Bishop Ford track team. That was about 60 pounds ago for me. but we did. We ran track. We were on the cross-country team for St. Francis College. And there was an opportunity to go to Ireland. We had gone to Ireland where we were supposed to train. That was at least the plan, but we really didn't train. We trained in a lot of the pubs in Ireland and didn't spend as much time on the track or on the roads. But on that trip, Eddie had said, well, look, if you're looking for a job, why don't you ask my dad to work the liquor store? So I went and I worked at Long's Liquor Store. And at the time, I was a registered Democrat. But by the time I left, I was a registered conservative. And I had gotten really officially involved in politics. I kind of came in there with some interests and some ideas. But by the time I left, I had a new voter registration card and an appointment with Marty Golden, Vito Fasella, and some of the other elected officials in the neighborhood. So it's interesting. We both kind of got our start in some way.
My Democrathood survived, though. Eight years with the Longs, and I'm still a Democrat.
That must have been
I will say they moved me right of center, though. Again, just when you see people like and the Longs are a prime example of that are entrepreneurial and very involved in the community. When you see I don't know, they have convincing arguments about some of their things. They're not always wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think there have been any number of things that they kind of move me right of center. In fact, I would say like in Yellow Hook, I was like the daytime Yellow Hook bartender. And so a lot of the people that I served on a daily basis, they were the retirees, And so in a lot of ways, I was a pretty young guy. I started working there, I was 23 years old. And I was dealing almost exclusively with, again, the daytime crowd, these, Bay Ridge institutional retired civil servants or carpenters and plumbers and iron workers and people that are just like salt of the earth sort of people. And I think
my base
right, yeah. Just like the quintessential Bay Ridge person, and I had a kind of a Benjamin Button sort of existence. At 23 years old, I was spending a lot of time with people a lot older than me, and just listening to what they had to say, and some of it stuck.
Yeah,
I have some older person tendencies from time to time.
Yeah, the same thing. The same thing sort of experience at the liquor store, right? I had a lot of people come in. What's interesting is my wife, my now wife Christine, tells me that her father, who I never had the opportunity to meet, would shop at Long's liquor store. When he would go on occasion to get something, he would go to Long's liquor store. So she was saying maybe at some point I probably had a conversation with him because, guys would come into the liquor store or show to the bar and strike up a conversation. So we often remark it may be the situation where I may have met her father years ago when I worked in the liquor store, but it really was a great experience. And they really are salt of the earth people. You mentioned being a Democrat. You're a Democrat surviving. Of course, mine didn't. But my father was a very active Democrat. He was a union guy, TWU, and very active in politics. But he had a lot of respect for Mike Long. He loved Mike Long. Also, we talk about being from the neighborhood. It's also a parish, right? Our Lady of Angels was sort of our parish, and like the 69th Street, low 70s is our area. and that parish, the Longs are very active in that parish. And my father had a lot of respect for Mike Long. So even though me and my father would argue politics, he had a lot of respect for Mike and the activities they were involved in.
I think, as what was it Winston Churchill said, that if you're young and conservative, you have no heart. If you're old and liberal, you have no brain. I think there's some truth to that.
Right.
And I can say that just as I get older, again, I started off almost 15 years ago working at Yellowhook. As I'm getting older, my appreciation for the things that Mike Long and the Long family have done has, and not just them, like there's a million other people that we could point to, Marty Golden, yourself, the people that have remained active steadily so throughout, all, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, like their involvement is incredibly inspiring, and if even if you can disagree with them all you want, you have to respect somebody that's involved in the process. And I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever. If you're involved, like you're at the table and you're helping to make something better than it was before. And you can disagree with them all you want, but you have to respect it.
Cool. Another thing I'd like to ask you is, you mentioned you're a New York City firefighter. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about how that came to be? Did you always want to be a firefighter? What was that process like, and what's it like, being a firefighter in New York City? And do you have any interesting stories to tell us about being a fireman?
I'm going to steal a line. We've been talking about the Longs a lot today, but I'm going to steal a line.
This wasn't scripted,
It really wasn't.
Right.
I'm going to steal a line from Matt Long, who was a New York City firefighter. He was actually on my podcast. He was a New York City firefighter that was hit by a bus during the 2005 transit strike in New York City. Had suffered horrific injuries and battled back and ended up running the New York City Marathon, and did the 2008, I think it was, Lake Placid Ironman, and was kind of was very instrumental in motivating me to start getting into shape, which then led me to run my first marathons, which then led me to do my first Ironmans, which then led me to become a professional athlete for 3 years, and really realized a lot of my goals. I'm going to steal a line from him, in that he said that he took the job just because his father kind of pushed him in that direction, said, what do you have to lose? If you hate it, you hate it, but I don't think you're going to hate it. And he says that it's a calling that he didn't know he had. And I kind of look at it similarly. It was something like traditionally throughout, since the Irish potato famine, my family has been cops and firemen. Since my great grandfather was one of the first ever paid New York City firefighters, which is a true story. That was Patrick Conahan. My middle name was Conahan.
Okay.
So I think my dad's been planning this out and I graduated Proby School in the 150th anniversary.
Wow.
Of the New York City Fire Department. And again, he was one of the paid New York City firefighters. Anyway, it has been transformative for me and challenged me in ways I hadn't expected. And I would listen. I knew a ton of firefighters, and I would hear them say things like, it's a family, and the camaraderie, and the kitchen table, and the way these things work. And I'm like, get over yourself, whatever. How strong of a bond can this really be? But it really is, and it's kind of helped. It's kind of changed the way I see a lot of things in the world, and changed the way I interact with a lot of things in the world. And I couldn't quite put my finger on why for a long time, until I read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's a fantastic book, and literally changed the way I see the world.
One of my questions was going to be, do you recommend any books? Maybe that's one of the books.
Tribe by Sebastian Junger. It's the book I'm recommending everyone right now. I can recommend a million books, but this one really